watching the Forefront Church video podcast. And wherever you're at viewing online, we just want to say thank you and welcome. And one of the ways that we can help connect with you is we want to hear from you and where you're at and how we can help. And so head over to forefrontchurch.info after the message and click the Connect tab. It's a great way for us to help you along in your spiritual journey as you connect with God and learn about Jesus. And so sit back, relax. We hope that you're challenged and encouraged from today's message.
It has been said that a friend is someone who runs in when everybody runs out. You know how that feels. It's been said that a friend is the one who is there and never, ever leaves. Now, there's a whole bunch of you here, and you might be thinking, man, there's some scenarios or situations in my life where I can think of that. They're already going through your head. Like you've been the person who's been there for the friend, like you've sat there with them, and you've also been the one that has been run out on. And those memories are seared in our brains and in our minds because we were built for relationships. We were built for friendships. Like we know what a great friendship is like. It's got things like loyalty and empathy and honesty. Like we want somebody who's going to stick with us, and we want somebody who's going to be empathetic and compassionate with us when we're going through stuff. But we also, if we're wise, we want somebody to tell us what we need to hear, especially when it's really, really hard. And see, we're built for relationships from the time we're born. Like, it's been a long time since I ever had a baby, but I remember when my girls were born, and I remember when they started to make eye contact, and then they would smile, and then they would start to realize that there's other human beings out in the world. And then they grow, and they get a little bit older, and what do? We start to make friends with other kids. And then as they get older, it gets a little bit more complicated because sometimes the friends that they choose, parents sit back and go, why did you choose this person? And then they become teenagers, and then it's like, it's game on at that point. It's like, oh, what do I do? Like, they are not the person that I would choose because adults are developed. They know, they've been through it, where kids don't always make the best decisions. When I was 8 years old, there was a stretch of that year where I was probably as badly behaved as I ever was as a child. I am, if you know me, I'm generally a rule keeper. There's a little anti-authority streak in me, but not much, just enough to keep me honest. But I'm generally a rule keeper. But in this time, I was not. Our family had moved from another state. We were living in an apartment. There weren't that many kids around except for one kid. There was one kid, he was my age, and he was going to be my new best friend. So we became friends. But what I shortly realized after getting to know him was that he was about as close to being a criminal as an 8-year-old can be. Okay, like, I'm serious. Like, he was mean, he was nasty, he was destructive. He said and did things that I had never heard of before. And I was like, you know, I think 8-year-old brain, I think this is cool, but it wasn't. It was bad. And there was one person who knew that this was bad for me, and that was my mama. Like, she sniffed it out. She was not happy about it. She's a retired elementary school teacher, and I think just teachers have it in their DNA, like they can sniff out naughty, like in a heartbeat, and it's like part of who they are. Well, that's what I grew up with, and she was not having it. So but what made this very ironic was that my friend's last name was Friend. That was his last name. Friend. So in my little 8-year-old brain, I was like, what could go wrong? His last name is Friend. He must be fine. Well, we vandalized a piece of property that belonged to an older child, and we got caught. And my mom and I were chatting about this the other day because it's been almost 50 years, but I remember it like it was yesterday. I remember how angry she was. She was so mad at me. And I remember her like getting a hold of me, and she had like one of those teacher pointy fingers, and she's like, in my chest, and like, you look at me, mister, which was easy because she's tiny, but she just like this. And then I don't know if she meant to say this, but she said, you look at me, mister. Mitchell friend is no friend. Like that. I was like, it's funny, years later, it wasn't at the time. And then she immediately marched my butt over to the kid's house whose property we destroyed and made me apologize to his parents and made me apologize to him. And what I didn't want to hear was what she was trying to tell me was that this was a terrible relationship. This was a terrible friendship. There was nothing good or enduring or anything else. It was actually just a friendship out of convenience. I really feel like we learn the best things about friendship when we're in a bad one. And whether we're 8, 18, 80, or anywhere in between, we want and are searching for the best kind of friendship possible. What is that, and what does it mean? So over the last 3 weeks, we've been in this series called Friendology. It's been great. But what we've really looked at is how do we conduct friendships? How do we deal with our friends? How do we do that in faith? And we have come face to face with some hard realities of some things. Like we've talked about the necessity of being selfless in our friendships. Like that was okay. But then when we got into the next couple of weeks, we started to have to take a deeper look at ourselves and to look out a little bit as to who we are friends with. Are we friends only with people who agree with us and do everything that we do and like everything that we like? Or is there some diversity in the people that we are in fellowship with or people that we hang out with? And then last week we even talked about like how do we develop friendships with people who may not believe the same things that we do? How do we have a discussion if we're in faith with somebody who is not in faith? Very, very important things. And this week, to kind of wrap it up, I want to pull it together because I think there's something that really solidifies this, that clarifies this for us, and that is if we can answer the following question. Could you consider yourself a friend of God? Given everything that you know about friendship, and given everything you know about where you are in faith, whether you're deeply faithful, kind of faithful, not really faithful at all, would you consider yourself a friend of God? And could you consider yourself a friend of God? Now, author and pastor Drew Hunter said it this way. What if you could have a friend who knew you better than anyone, better than you even know yourself? And what if, knowing everything, he still loved you and even liked you? And what if you could have a friend who, by his very relationship with you, would transform you to become a better friend to others? So whether you're sitting here or whether you're at home watching us online, you understand what he's getting at here. He's talking about this idea of being friends with God. Now, you might sit here and you may be kind of dipping in here for the first time. Maybe you're watching online for the first time and you're kind of unsure about God, and you might be like, I don't even know if I believe that he exists. Why would I ever be a friend with him? Or you might have come from a bad church experience. You may have had a lot of baggage with people who claimed faith, claimed to love God, but didn't act anything like you would imagine God would. That was really my story. Like, I was beginning to kind of be down with the God thing, but the people that represented him, I was like, I think I want to stay away from you. And then there's people who just don't believe at all because they see God as kind of authoritarian, like he's got his thumb on us and he wants us to just do what he says. Completely understand that. So your question might be a little bit different, but I would just ask you, could you crack the door a little bit, and could that be you? Could you be friends with him? So we're going to be in a section of the New Testament today that is going to kind of walk that out. We're going to be in a story where Jesus is kind of telling us about himself and about God and what he thinks about how we can be in friendship with him. But I want you to have kind of the answer with you as we go along. I want you to know where we're going. In case you get a phone call and you have to leave, or you just want to leave, or your kids are acting up, whatever that is, I want you to ask yourself what it would look like if you came close to God and you stayed close to him. Because that's the answer right there. If God were your friend of friends, and you were convinced that everything that he does through you permeates every other relationship that he has, would that be worth you coming close and staying close? Just like you would do for a friend, or just like a friend would do for you, but better. Because no matter where you are in faith, whether you've followed God for your whole life, or maybe you're just kind of touching base here, exploring, or you're not sure at all, being friends with God will have huge implications for your life. Because from the very, very beginning of the story, God has always wanted a relationship with us. It is really, the true story is that we've been running from God the whole time. He has always been there. He's wanted to be friends with us. Why? Because there's things that a relationship with God gives a human being. Great peace. As good an understanding as we can have about life. That even when it gets hard, there's an explanation that we don't always understand, but He is there. He helps us with our relationships. And what we're going to see is that He talks about friendship in a deep manner. That He is there for us in our life, and He's there for us in our relationships. So we're going to kind of walk through that this morning. Before we get started, let's pray. God, thank you so much for today. Thank you that we have a place to come where we get answers, which sometimes lead to more questions, which sometimes lead to a realization that you are who you say you are, or it helps to teach us to move forward in faith. It helps us to walk out of here and not just check the block that we were here, but that we would take something with us that we could walk out and just apply to our lives. So people would look at us not in a pat on the back way, but like, man, you're different. Tell me why. And that we could impact the world through you. We love you when we pray this in your name. Amen. So we're going to be in a writing called John, which is the fourth writing or book of the New Testament. You have Old Testament, New Testament, first four writings in the New Testament, complete story about Jesus right there. And we're going to be in the fourth book of that group called John. And if you don't have an easy-to-read version of the Bible, man, we really want you to have one. You should go out afterwards at the Get Connected area, say hi to one of our fine folks there, and get you an actual paper Bible to read. But maybe you'd rather just stick with the digital device, and that's fine. We have a digital hub at forefrontchurch.info. There's a Bible embedded in there. I placed some notes in there that are going to kind of support what we're talking about today. Also in there is a weekly study that goes right along with what we're talking about. And then there's other stuff in there that you can kind of engage what's going on here and learn a little bit more of what's happening here. So we're going to be in John. And John is an amazing book because John was actually one of the very first people that Jesus appointed, that Jesus sort of said, hey, I want you to follow me. I want you to, as I, come about in my ministry, as I start to reveal myself to the world, as I start to minister to people, I want you to come with me. And what we read is that John is the one that Jesus loved. And John writes in some very beautiful language the story of Jesus. You should read it. It's just the way he puts it together. It's beautiful. And we read about how Jesus comes to prominence. We read about the people that he ministered to. There's some miracles sprinkled in there that kind of keep our attention. But as we get closer to like halfway, a little bit further, around chapter 13, Jesus begins to reveal a little bit more of who he is in his divine way, the divine nature of Jesus. And he starts to let the apostles know, he starts to let his followers know that he is going to leave them. He's going to die. And when we get to chapter 13, he's in something called the upper room, the Last Supper. You may have heard it. And it's a gathering, but it's a solemn gathering because he's telling them that he's going to leave them. And then by chapter 14, he's consoling them because those that are following him, they're upset. Their leader has brought them all this way and has taught them so much, and now he's talking about how he's going to leave them. So he's consoling them while at the same time giving them the answer that the Holy Spirit, or this other piece of God, is going to sort of replace him, and that those that would say, hey, I commit my life to God, the Holy Spirit would come on them and sort of lead them. And then we arrive at chapter 15. And here it is in chapter 15 where he lays out what it is to be connected to God. Now remember, why is this important? Because we've always sought friendship. We've always wondered what God thinks of us. And now, as Jesus is beginning to exit and he's getting ready to hand over this whole idea to his followers, he gives us an illustration. In verses 1 through 11 of chapter 15, he gives us an illustration of a plant, but not just a plant with a vine on it. And he describes himself as the vine. He describes God as the gardener, because you have to have a gardener to tend a plant. And he refers to his followers and us, applies to us, as branches. And what does he say? He talks about how important it is to remain healthy. How do we remain healthy? In a healthy plant, we stay with the plant. We know that if we prune a plant, everything that we prune is waste. It's disconnected. It's no longer healthy. It's something that we get rid of. What Jesus spends 11 verses doing is telling us to remain connected to him. In fact, he uses the word remain 11 times in the translation that you guys have that's out in the lobby. And many of the other translations, many times in verses 1 through 11, he says, remain in me. He's after us in a good way. He's encapsulating what God has brought to bear up to this point. I love you. I care about you. I want you to remain in me. To remain healthy means to stay in me. And since it's a fruit-bearing plant, what he's saying is that when you remain in me and you're healthy, you're going to bear fruit. We know that when a plant is taken care of, one that bears fruit, when we nurture it and we water it and we take care of it, it produces fruit, and it's good. So what does that mean for us? The fruit that he's talking about is when we have a relationship with God, you might consider yourself a kind person, you'll be kinder. You'll be more compassionate. You'll think better about people that you don't know. All those concepts over the last 3 weeks of looking at people that are different from us, you'll look at them with love. Because he wants you to come close and he wants you to stay close. So he through 11 verses, he tells us how important this is. He tells us how we'll be compassionate and loyal and better and why this connection with him is so important. And it's all behind this coming close and staying close idea. Remain in me. Get close to me. You should start thinking about what is driving my everyday? What is driving my decisions? And then starting in verse 12 through 17, he sort of lays out the plan for us. He paints a picture of what closeness looks like. He starts in verse 12 by saying, my command is this, love each other as I have loved you. Well, we've got 15 and a half chapters of him telling us how that is. We've got 3 other manuscripts that talk about his life. We've got, 1,500 years or so of the Old Testament that leads us to deduce that he is the Messiah and the Savior of the world. So the very thing that he says, my command is this, loving each other as I have loved you, this should make complete sense to the reader because we have seen how his story has evolved over this. And what he's saying is, do as I have done. Remain in me, and you will do as I have done. He's saying that sacrificial love is the distinctive mark of a person who follows God. That when you're friends with God, the distinguishing mark is love, always is. But then he says something else, and he says it's even better than that. He says, greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. Here's the gold standard of love. The gold standard. Nothing could be higher. Nothing could be greater. There are people in your life that you would give your life to. He did that for us already. He came and he gave his life. He sacrificed everything for us. God put him here for the express purpose of dying for you and for me. For everything that we've ever done or everything that we ever will do, it's like he posted bail for us. Like it was game over when he came. And look at, he revealed his story. He connected with us. He lived it out to be close to us. And then he says this, you are my friends if you do what I command. Now, on its own, you might think the word command is that's kind of a hard word. But think about it in your most closest relationships. There are things that you do automatically because you care for that person. There are things that just happen. And during marriages and friendships, this is a hallmark of it. There are things that you know that the other person loves. That's what you do. There's things that you know are valuable in that other person's life, and you do those things. This makes complete sense to us, that we would naturally respond like a friend. And here's what's cool. God knows, Jesus knows, John knows when he wrote this, that when we use the word friend, it's something that human beings can go, I know what that's like. Because we know that we have a responsibility to the relationship. If we're a good friend, if we're an honorable friend, we have a responsibility to the relationship because we know that when we respond, it enhances the relationship. And just to make sure that we understand where he's at, he tells us what it isn't. He says, I no longer call you servants because a servant does not know what his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends, for everything that I learned from my Father I have made known to you. There is a distinction between a servant and a master, a boss and an employee. I'm sure there's probably 2 or 3 people in this room who have worked for somebody who ain't all that. Bosses. What do you think, like the worst boss that you can ever conceive of? You can be the sweetest person in the world and have that boss and go, ugh, nope. Like you go in already like shields up, nope. And what they say, you're just whatever. You're indifferent. You can be angry at a boss. Now, God, huge, supreme, all-knowing, awesome. At some level, even your most skeptical believer would go, God would have to be something like amazing for me to give my attention to, okay? So we know we have somewhat of a reference towards him, no matter where you come from. But what he's saying is, I want something more. I don't simply want your obedience. I want your friendship. Because we know that friendships connotate enduring relationships, nurturing interaction between people. And in years of talking to people about God in my own experience, I think this is where the breakthrough happens with a person who at one point was not really sure about God to when they go, yes. It's when they realize that, wait, he loves me. He cares about me. He's like a good friend. If you just thought about the fact that he put Jesus here to die for you, not to mention the other billions of people that have ever been on the planet, like think about that for a second. And it's a breakthrough point, and when it happens right here, it's like game over, because then you can start to understand that you will never earn your way into God's love. You've always been loved. You will never be condemned for who or what you are, because he's loved you forever. And Jesus continues by talking to his disciples. He said, look, you did not choose me, but I chose and appointed you. Notice what it doesn't say. It doesn't say, I chose and appointed you to make you follow a bunch of rules like a boss and be a servant and for me to make your life miserable and never have any fun. No, he says, I appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit that will last. I've invited you to remain in me. I've invited you to be a part of me. I've shown you how to live a loving and compassionate life. You've learned that. Now go. Go and do the same. This is my command, to love each other. He said that at the very beginning. He tells the disciples how. He walks them through this. And he tells them that this is your mission. This is what you can do. Look how I put this together for you. Be aligned with God. And it ends kind of where it begins. In verse 17. Let me back that up. This is my command, to love each other. He ends the same way he began. Just to kind of put another bookend on it. What this is really about is God. It's about us getting so close to God that it's the major relationship that overflows into everything else. So when you ask yourself, why be friends with God? The answer is simply this: he is for you. He has so much history in chasing us down and hoping that we're going to turn. There's very little evidence that he hates you. There's very little evidence that he doesn't like human beings. It's quite the contrary. He's the friend that never leaves you. He's loyal. A couple chapters over in John chapter 13, we read this. It was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come. This is the Last Supper time for him to leave the world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. There are verses and stories and theology in the Old Testament that has this very same language. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. You will find the same language in the New Testament. You can go shields up on God, say no, 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 but he is never, ever going to leave you. No matter how you come to him or run from him, he is always going to be there. And that's what we would want in a close, and enduring friendship when you lose the job that you always dreamed of, when the relationship falls apart that you planned on, when your kids move out and you're lonely. Whatever the situation is, it brings you to the point of hopelessness. What is it that will endure? It's him. You want a friend that's compassionate, who's perfect. There was a story of a friend that Jesus had named Lazarus, and he died. And they bring Jesus to his side, and he's dead. And we read that Jesus wept. He had compassion over the fact that he just lost his friend. And you could go into the gospel accounts of Jesus' life, those first 4 books that I talked about, and find example after example after example where he encountered human being after human being who was broken and hopeless and in loss and in grief and in mourning. And he sat with them and he helped them and he showed compassion on them. And in this moment, in his own situation, he wept. We want to know that the perfect friend has empathy and compassion for us. And the other piece that we want to know is that we're going to have a perfect friend who's going to be honest with us. There's a whole section of writings in the Bible called wisdom literature. It's like around the Proverbs, Psalms area. Like, you should read it. Like, Proverbs, there's 31 chapters of Proverbs, which is nothing but wisdom. It'll make your head spin. Like, there's like, if you can think, I wonder if it's wise too, it'll be in there. You know, I like Proverbs because it tells me that having gray hair makes me wiser. So it's one of my favorite places to go, okay? But it talks about stuff in there that helps to guide us. God's whole idea for us is to be wise and to listen to good wisdom. Proverbs chapter 27, verses 5 and 6 says, an open rebuke, it's kind of when somebody tells you what the deal is better than hidden love. Wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. We want a true, good, and perfect friend who's willing to sit down with us and go, hey, the way you're going here is unwise. Hey, I love you, but man, I'm really concerned about you. The one who multiplies kisses is the person who's just going to kind of hide it, just throw it on. They're your fan. They're like, oh, it's okay. We want a good and perfect friend who comes and saves us from ourselves. That's exactly what he does here. So what is our part in all of this? Our part is we need to show up. We need to get to some place where we either go back to what we knew when we came to faith, which was that God loved us, and we revisit that story, and our hearts get broken again over the fact that he cared so much for us, and we start to become his friend. We draw closer to him. We take his gift back on board. We start to think about the love that he gave to us. We start to buy into the idea of grace again, that there's nothing that we could ever do to separate ourselves from him. But yet, truth is, God doesn't hear from us enough. Let me put it to you this way. How many of you in here right now, by a show of hands, know somebody that owns a pickup truck? That's a lot of people. Why do you know who owns a pickup truck? Why is that information important? You can say it. Help move. What else? Right. Haul stuff. We all know that. I've never had a conversation with my wife where I've said, I wonder who has a subcompact. Never. I own a pickup truck. Occasionally, very occasionally, you'll get a call. It usually starts like this. Hey. You know who that friend is? You don't hear from them very often, do you? Hey. I'm wondering if this is the way that we have our relationship with Jesus. That the only time we have a conversation with him is when we need a pickup truck. He's the only one, like, he's really wanting to hear from us, but yet we just go to him when it gets tough, or maybe we're like, Jesus is my homie, or we just kind of throw stuff out there. But we're really not his friend. Like, he says, yeah, I kind of know him, but I'm not sure. God would say, I love him, care about him, but I just never hear from him. And I don't know where the state of your faith is. Sometimes I'll hear people say, like, me and God ain't getting along right now. He just sort of left me. He abandoned me. He's silent. I'm kind of mad at him right now. God is everywhere, in case you didn't know that. He is everywhere. He's not the one who walked away. It really is on us. But here's the other thing. I do realize, because I was a skeptic for a long time, I realize that there are people who are unsure, and there are some people who aren't happy, and there are some people who've had some difficult things, and God can seem far away. And sometimes we keep our distance from God because the things that we know that we're going to hear, while great and wise and probably good for us, we don't want to because it might mean that we need to change. And wherever you are, whether you're skeptical, indifferent, upset, whatever, still one of the top questions that people ask is, what does God think of me? As mad or angry or I don't care, I don't know, or maybe he is, we still wonder when it gets really dark and you can't sleep and all you can hear is your heartbeat. We ask the question, what does God think of me? He thinks you're his friend. He went to immense lengths to tell you that, to teach you that, to show you that, to create a world that he is the most available in. He's not looking for a servant because you're precious. He just wants his friend. 20 years ago, I found myself unsure what God thought of me. I know what I thought of me, and it wasn't very good. And I just got to a point in my life where I was like, what do I do? Very lost. So I took my family to church. We went to this very strange church that met in a movie theater at Regal. It's this one. And within the first 5 minutes of walking in there, at age 37 years old, I was like, I walked out of there going, God loves everybody. Within 5 minutes of being there, that's what I heard. The unmerited grace of God, that I get loved on by God no matter what. And then over time, I began to believe that maybe he even loved me. So I started to draw a little bit closer. And I started to realize that staying closer was the way to go here. And I really thought, as I watched my life change, I thought, man, the background that I was brought up on, it was void of faith and was difficult, that maybe having a faith in God, being his friend, that it would change the legacy of my family. See, when we go to him or we come back to him, we reduce the distance between ourselves and him. When we decide every day that we're going to sit up, put our feet on the ground, pray to him, and come to him every day with every moment with fresh eyes like he just became our friend, things change. Because what you realize when you come to faith and you stay in faith and you continue to grow is you come face to face with your flaws, you come face to face with your issues, you come face to face with your biases and your blind spots. But Jesus has a great way of stripping all that away, and he starts to replace it with things like deep love and integrity and commitment to other people. And the other thing that it does, it enhances the beautiful things about every one of us. Because every one of you in here, you're the only one of you that's ever going to be, and there's things about you that are unique to anybody else, and he wants to see you thrive in those things. But the very thing that he wants most is that you would be his friend. We're all valuable. He gives us a new outlook. And when you're here and you see somebody that makes a decision that they want to be God's friend, that they want to choose him, that they want to change their life, they get baptized. They make the decision that Jesus is who he is. And at the very end of the baptism videos that we show, we see this screenshot. Let me back up one here. Screenshot right there. We see this welcome home idea. Why do we put that up there? Welcome home. It's powerful. Because in that moment when you make a decision for God, it feels like you came home. It feels like this is where I always was supposed to be. Like when I got baptized, I was sitting in a little room, drying off, right down here at St. John's Baptist Church, because Forefront had no building. We went around and asked people to borrow stuff all the time. I'm sitting in that room there, and it hits me. Overwhelming. Hits me. Just a sense of relief. Like I believe there's a place that we all want to go, that we deeply hope for, no matter who we are. And I felt like I had finally gotten there in that moment. There's more than we could ever hope for. Because here's the thing, and I said it earlier, God is in every nook and cranny of your life. He was in every nook and cranny of mine. I just took a long time to figure it out. But he's always been there. He's always been a friend. He's always been available. And what he's asking us to do and consider is that maybe being his friend could enhance our lives and change the course of them forever. So I would say learn how to do that. Explore God if you're on the fence. If you've been in faith for a long time, reevaluate where you're at. What gets you excited again? Every morning, put your feet on the floor. Pray God, number one, that you're breathing. And then number two, spend some time with him so that you're ready to go out into the world and show people what love is. Because we are in a point in history right now when you watch the news, I can't even watch the news anymore. I can't listen to it because the hate is palpable. I was a little boy in the civil rights era. I cannot remember a time where I have observed more hate. But we change that when we decide. There's only one who can change the hearts of man. We get the option to become friends with him and then to go out and to start to be the change agent. Because there is only one that can ever be called friend, and that's him. When we come to him, when we seek him.
Thanks for tuning in to the Forefront Church video podcast. Our hope and prayer is that this has left you encouraged and challenged you in your faith. And you might have some questions and some ways that you want to figure this out, and we want to help with that. Head over to forefrontchurch.info, and there's a couple different ways that you can connect. Click the Connect tab and let us know how we can be praying for you or a staff member can be contacting you this week. Maybe you have just been encouraged by this and want to support the ministry here at Forefront Church. You can click the Giving tab as well as other tabs that are in there to help you along in your journey with God. And so we're thankful for you. Thanks for tuning in. And we cannot wait to see you again here online on the video podcast. We love you, and we'll see you then.